Hey, what's up, everybody? You are watching On the Town with Tanya, and I'm your host. Thank you very much for coming back again this week. Tonight's guest is a licensed clinical social worker, a coach with over 22 years of professional experience. She's worked with the very diverse group client population in a varieties of settings. She now specializes in treatment of career women living with debilitating anxiety, and she works intensively with women suffering from trauma experienced as a result of infertility and pregnancy loss. She is committed to providing a safe space for women not only to grow in, but to heal and thrive as well. Please welcome Iyana A. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. This has been a big topic for a while because there's so many women facing infertility. But first, tell us about your what you do, your counseling services that you provide, and then we'll go into um,
Okay.
infertility.
Sure. So I am the founder and proprietor of Iyana A, LCSW, counseling services as well as coaching services. So it's two prongs. On the counseling side, I am a licensed clinical social worker, and so I provide individual, group, and couples counseling. Um, and I diagnose and treat and help people learn how to better manage, a mental health diagnosis such as anxiety or depression. I really specialize in anxiety for women, career women who are experiencing anxiety that can at times be debilitating. I
Yes.
also work therapeutically with people who are, dealing with infertility and pregnancy loss. And then on the coaching side, it's a little bit of a less diagnostic approach, and it's more about goal setting. So I do coaching for people who have experienced loss and maybe want to think about what their family is going to look like now.
Yes.
I also do coaching and help people get out of their own way. I have a package called Get Out of Your Own Way, which is like you have goals, you have things you want to achieve, but you keep creating your own obstacles. And so I kind of come in there and help people clear that out.
Okay, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So tell us. I mean, there's. I did want to touch on some just a piece of a racial thing because there's a lot of anxiety that brown
Yeah.
folks are experiencing. So I was gonna either get that out first and then go into infertility because that's the big chunk. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
That's
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, hi you guys. I see you out there now. I had to do something, so I see you now. Glad you're out there somewhere. I appreciate you for watching. There's a lot of I'm just saying this in my opinion. Since our 45th president, there have been a lot of escalation of what appears to me like a lot of incidents that are now coming out as racial trauma. I guess I want to call it. I may be saying the absolute wrong word.
Yeah.
I know I have anxiety now. I've never had anxiety in my life.
Hmm.
I've never ever had anxiety. I have anxiety now. Um,
Hmm.
and I hear young people saying they have certain anxiety, especially young girls. Certain areas where they're being kidnapped left and right. So I just wanted to see,
Yeah.
has that gone up? And well, go ahead. I'll ask that first. Has that gone up? The amount of people of color that you're seeing that are being affected by all the things that are going on.
Yeah, I definitely would say that studies support the fact that there is an increase in anxiety, specifically for people of color or, BIPOC um, people. I think very specifically for Black people, there definitely has been an increase in anxiety over the threat of, racial discrimination, sorry, or
That's okay.
racial harm, uh,
Hmm.
because I think with, everything that happened in the summer of 2020, I think for the first time in a very long time, people were exposed to images of
Right.
assault on Black and Brown people back to back to back to back to back. So in such rapid, succession. And we had seen images of police brutality and things like that before, but I think this summer it was so intense and it was like one, two, three, four, five. Every time you turned around,
Right.
it was a new incident. And
Yes.
then I think, except for really, the convictions related to the George Floyd incident, all the other incidents, Breonna Taylor, the gentleman who was in Wisconsin. His name is escaping me right now. But all of those acts of violence went unpunished. So
Right.
not only were we very much aware of the fact that, violence was happening, it was happening on camera. And even when it was happening on camera, nothing was being done about it. So I think it definitely made people feel more vulnerable. And I think that, after having had President Obama, I think a lot of Black and brown people kind of felt like, oh, things are getting better. And then we had 45, and it seemed like things kind of just started going backwards, and so I think that certainly caused an increase in stress. I think that, if you're a Black or brown person, you're out in a community where there are not a lot of people who look like you, it's understandable why you would be anxious. We know that discrimination is high. We know institutionalized, racism really affects people's livelihood, whether or not they're in prison for something they haven't done. And we know that the system doesn't work for us. So, of course, yes, I would definitely say there's been an increase. And we have information about it now more so than before.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I'm so happy you touched on that, because it's a big thing. And I hear people all the time saying, is it me, or is it just you, or is it us? And I was like, no, I think it's a lot of people. And here's the kicker. I think it's also some of my white friends are also experiencing trauma because they don't know how to deal with none of it. It's like, I feel bad from on one side. And so people will be like, well, you have privilege and you have this. And they're like, I don't want any of this stuff. I just want to be a human being and love everybody, like peace, happy. Yeah. But so they got the middle. So now they have stuff. And they can't tell anybody because everyone's like, really? What's this about?
I think you raise a good point in the sense that, sometimes in certain areas of society, when racism is discussed, it's like, oh, that's, brown people's problem or Black people's problem, or the people who are being discriminated against, it's their problem, but it's everybody's problem. So, you raise a good point in the sense that if you are a white person and you're aware of your privilege, or, you care very deeply about Black and brown people, and you're real about what happens to those people, and how their lives can be much more at risk than yours. I don't know what kind of person who carries that consciousness in their mind every day probably wouldn't at some point experience guilt or experience questions about, like, can I do something about it? So it's not only people who are victims of racism who are carrying the burden of, like, what should be done or what action should we take. It's also people who are aware that they have privilege and that they may in fact be a large essential part of the process of changing it. But it's like people don't know what to do. And so it's an added burden, and it's also an added element of confusion. Like, how do I handle this?
Right, exactly. And that's for a lot of people. I mean, I've had some good table discussions on this one. I was like, why couldn't you guys have been on the show when we were talking about this? But it's not. So would you say we're more, African American on a whole are more open to therapy? Because the old stereotype. Versus now, because someone looks like us, like we have therapists like yourself, which is awesome. I even found a Black doctor that day. I was like, what? Let me find out. So I was like, that, because you don't have to go in, and this is what I say, you don't have to go in with the trust and the intent. I no longer have to think, is this a genocide, or is this like conspiracy?
Right. Or does this person kind of get what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Are they going to get where? And a lot of times people don't get it. And they act like they do, and they don't. So it's hilarious. It's hilarious to me. I'm like, oh, wow, you're lucky you're getting paid. I'm getting paid to make jokes all day. So as a comedian, it's great, but as a real person, hello,
yes.
Are you seeing more of us saying, you know what? I need some healing because of all these years of trauma, and whether that's family trauma, genetic trauma, or what do you call it? Family passed down generation to generation trauma, or whether that's societal race stuff. Trauma that's just developed in the last, it's been here because we used to have hangings and nooses, whatever.
It's acknowledged now, I think.
It's acknowledged, and people still doing it and don't care. Like, they're still going into the church, and like they just like, I don't care, because I'm not going to really be penalized anyway. It's like, so it's. Do you think that we're coming more to you because we're like, okay, trust is no longer an issue with the therapist, right?
So a couple of things, a couple of points of opinion on that, and also statistics to back it up. We do see that Black people are entering into therapy and seeking mental health assistance more than ever before, statistically. I think that the number of clinicians who look like you and I has, of course, increased exponentially over, the last years. Still, only 4% of therapists are Black women. So it's still a very small number.
4%?
Yes. And I think that, I live in New York City, and, I think depending on where you are and depending on where your practice is, it's much easier for, let's say, a Black woman to find, another Black woman clinician probably in New York City than it is in, I don't know, Waresville,
Right.
So I think it really depends on where you are. But I think that the fact that we're seeing that there are people of color who are working in mental health professions, I think the fact that there have been a lot of educational campaigns to educate people of color about the fact that, mental illness it's not a crime, it's not a moral issue, it's not even a spiritual issue, because you can, have a mental illness and believe in God and, still feel depressed.
Yes.
So I think that the combination of people having access to education, people seeing people that look more like them in these fields, and then the fact that there's been a lot of education done around, educating people about seeking help for mental health issues, is not something that should be stigmatized. I think people are now starting to come in. I also think that, like, community organizations like the church, or community centers, social justice, agencies, they're also championing the cause of mental health. And so I think that when you see, like, community partners that people have long put trust in, saying it's okay to go to someone and talk about this, and in fact you might be able to find somebody who looks like you and shares experience with you, I think people now feel like it's more acceptable.
Okay, so that's great. I'm so happy to hear that, and I know a lot of people now who normally would say, like, I'm not going to any therapy.
Right.
Now I'm like, okay, time for me to go to the therapist, because at some point, that's just any human being. It all gets too much, especially after a pandemic. Like, it's like we had the pandemic to deal with, and that was, I mean, everybody, rich, poor, Black, white, it does not matter.
Everybody was in therapy, right?
Everybody had some ways of dealing with this and could not believe the amount of stress that we were all going through. You could have $5 million and you still had to stay home.
Right. That's the thing. That the pandemic was, for many people, I think, of our generation, it was the first, like, great equalizer, right? Because, like, no matter where you were in the world, the pandemic affected you in some way, shape, or form, right? So I think it was the first time, probably since, like, the influenza outbreak, in the 20th century, where, like, the whole world was affected by something. And then everybody, like you said, rich, poor, working, not working, housed or undomiciled, was affected by this. So it was the first time that we had, like, a joint trauma that everybody was like, this is messed up, and this is, and it's affecting our socialization. It's affecting
the socialization piece.
Right.
Can we talk about that?
So I think people felt like, oh, I have permission to talk about this because everybody's in the same boat right now. And then couple that, we had the pandemic, everything shut down in March here in this country. And then in the summertime, all these instances of racial unrest and police brutality were coming up every week. So it was like a powder keg, and everybody was home in front of their TV.
And people were like, it was binging with popcorn. Like, oh, I don't even have to go to the movies for action thriller. I mean, I just like, and it's not funny. Sorry, guys. It's not funny. But as a comedian, I have to make something out of it, because everyone was like, is this, wait a minute, let me turn this TV on. It's really happening? Because I can't go to work, and then I can't do this. And then when I do this, I got to wear the mask. Like, there was so many elements to this that I don't know how anybody came through this pandemic without needing a therapist.
No. And I think anybody who didn't go to therapy probably has residual trauma that they may not be aware of, or they are aware of and they just haven't worked it through. And the thing is, like, we're still in the middle of this pandemic. We're definitely not in lockdown the way we were 2 years ago, but COVID rates are rising again. So it's like the up and down of, like, things seem to be getting back to normal, and then things seem to be getting worse.
Right.
It's like a consistent roller coaster that the whole world has been on.
Yes.
And that's very stressful from a mental health perspective.
Well, for you though, as a therapist, this must be the field. I mean, I actually was like, if I only have like a couple more years to really go for that, just really go for it. Because
Right.
I basically should have. They told me you should have just minored in psychology. You only needed a few more credits, but I didn't. It's long story short, that was not my
It
calling.
wasn't your calling,
Yeah,
right?
I did counseling, but that was not my,
Right.
being a therapist was not my first calling. How about that?
Yeah. Got it.
So I have to keep that for someone that this is their dream. This they always want to help somebody,
Yeah.
and that what I'm saying, it's a different motivation, I'll call it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you because
Thank you.
it's been hard to find a therapist these days that unless you got $600 a pop,
Right.
I mean, I saw a kid. I felt bad for him. He was on antidepressants and everything. This is just a scenario, roundabout scenario, and he's actually a comedian. He was making a joke about it. It's hilarious. It's not hilarious, but it's hilarious. He was like, "Yeah." So I told my therapist that I'm, not really feeling great. You know what I mean? I don't want to say that out on radio, whatever this is.
Right.
But he's not feeling good about himself. It's in a set, so that's why we're like, he's okay.
Right.
But he's saying, and you know what she tells me? $600, please. He was like, yeah. And then when I told her that I lost my job and didn't have the money, she was like, you got to find somebody else.
Find another provider.
Exactly. So it becomes this thing. It is comedic in a way because it's like, yeah, people, we have to learn how to keep our brains keep our brains in function in case we can't afford a therapist. You have to still know how to check yourself.
Yeah. And I think you raise a really good point. Like, obviously, when everything shut down and everybody was on lockdown and people were sick and people were paranoid, and actually, I shouldn't even use the word paranoid because, there was a real threat. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't a hallucination to think that it was sometimes dangerous to be outside because depending on what setting you were in, it was.
Yes.
Right. Especially in the beginning, when we didn't know much about COVID and how it was spread and all of that. So, of course, for people in my field, that was really like a time where, our phones were ringing off the hook and everybody wanted to be therapy. And so from a professional perspective or a financial perspective, it was a good time to be making money and a good time to be in this business. At the same time, I think it's sad that sometimes people have to wait till there's like a global or a large scale crisis to say like it's okay for me to take care of my mental health. So I was so glad that people got into therapy as a result of the pandemic. I think that there are some people who are still in therapy and realize, how valuable it was. At the same time, it's okay to not be in crisis and to say, I want to go and talk to a therapist and, maybe I just want to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, or want a neutral party who doesn't know me, doesn't know anybody else in my life, and can just give me kind of an objective opinion. So you can use therapy, like prophylactically.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can.
I love that word.
Yeah. And I think it's good. And I think, if you can find somebody that you feel comfortable speaking about, should something happen that you really do need treatment for, or you do really need a space to like get things off your chest, then great, you already have this person.
Absolutely. And I even I used to tell my friends because I say God made friends so you won't bother your parents or your siblings, and then He made therapists so that you can leave your friends alone because the truth is they can only handle so much too. Like I mean it's one thing for me to share here's my secret friend to help me out, but that's beyond. That's just I know I got somebody here. I'm safe. The basic, right? But when you get to detail, especially when it's deep trauma, you have you need someone that can like compartmentalize all this stuff, sort it out like a puzzle, and then y'all can put it together and decide where it really needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I'm really big on like trying to check people's capacity, whether they're your friend, whether they're your friend who happens to be a therapist, regardless of who they are, sometimes you just pick up the phone or, or and call someone or start texting someone and, like we like vomit our whole, problems or our issues. And so I'm really big on like trying to check in with people and say like, do you have the capacity, or I'm not feeling great right now. I would really appreciate being able to talk to you. Are you okay with that? Right. Because if the person's not in the mind space, whether they're, the best trained therapist or not, if they're not willing or they don't have it to give, it's not going to be helpful for you.
Yes.
Same thing with your friends and your family. And then, sometimes there are people who, depending on how much trauma they've experienced or depending on the enormity of the emotion that they're experiencing, they're sharing, which is great, but then they're also overwhelming the person that they're sharing with because that
Right.
person is not trained to know how to deal with that. And a minute ago, you said, compartmentalize. And that's true. Like, that's part of what we learn as therapists.
Right.
That's not a skill that everybody has.
No, I know. I didn't realize it too. Why everybody keeps hitting me up, telling me literally, I'm getting like all kinds suicide calls, you name it, I'm getting them. And I'm like, why are they calling me? And I said, I forgot I was in counseling.
You used to be.
I was an addiction counselor, but all the modalities pretty much.
The skills are the same, yeah.
The same thing. You have to motivate people, and you have to make people see why they should motivate themselves. So it's to me, it's the same ballpark. But I realize
people feel like they know you're listening. You communicate that you're hearing them. So
yes, I mean, I don't mind. I'm not complaining. It was just that I was like, why do they keep calling me? Everybody keep calling me. Who am I gonna call? Which is what happened after the pandemic. I actually had what I would call a Tanya breakdown. Not where you would see it, but you might. But any of my friends wouldn't see it because I'm already always at a 15 or 20.
Okay.
When I get depressed, I'm probably at a 10.
Okay.
Which most people can't even get to a 10. So you get what I'm saying? Like I'm not the type of person you'd be like, yeah, she's really depressed.
But it wasn't normal for you. It wasn't your normal.
Exactly. I'm always upbeat, happy, and I kept saying it was just I know it was the pandemic because I never had any problems before. It could be my age, maybe I'm over 50. It could be, but I'm gonna say the pandemic has taken me over to another level because things like going to the freaking grocery store after lockdown. Do you know what that's like? It's like, oh my God, there's more than 2 people. I'm going to have a heart attack.
Honestly, I think for about a year and a half, didn't set foot in the supermarket.
Oh my gosh, really?
And I started going recently, but just like to get a few things. I still do a large part of my shopping online. And it's convenient because everything is brought right to you, but it's also not convenient because you don't get to touch the fruit and see if it's not bruised and everything. But I definitely, before the pandemic, going to the supermarket was something I like to do. Right. But then it got to the point where I was like, I felt guilty at the beginning of the pandemic about going outside because I have a small child. It was my husband, my child, and I were here. And I was like, if I go outside to Dunkin' Donuts and I don't really need to get a donut and I get sick and I bring it home and I make one of them sick, it's going to be my fault. So these are the things that people were thinking about on a regular basis, feeling guilty about going to get a cup of coffee or going, food shopping. And that's a lot to deal with. And so I think for many people, the pandemic was kind of the tipping point, and everything just kind of compounded. And then, many people looked up and said, okay, well, I need to talk to somebody.
Wow. Well, before we transition, what I'll do is I'll play a video and we'll transition to the next infertility. Just give us 1 or 2 quick things that right now, if anyone's out there who's dealing with any kind of anxiety from whether it's a pandemic, racial trauma, or opposite, being someone white, having to see all this stuff or whatever, give us just some kind of piece of advice.
Yeah, so I think that certainly if something comes up for you time and time again, if something continues to be on your mind, it's worth talking about. I think that a lot of times what I hear from people is, oh, well, I'm really blessed. I have a job. I have a good life. I don't have anything to complain about, so I really don't have a right to feel sad or feel anxious, feel depressed. That's not true. If it's coming up for you, if it's resonating for you, if it's persisting, it's important to you and therefore it is important and it's worth talking about. So I would say don't judge yourself for whatever your worries or your anxieties or your emotional experience is. Acknowledge it, and there is someone who can talk to you about that. And, it's their job and it's their pleasure to do that. So I'd say, number 1, don't judge yourself. Just do whatever you have to do to get in contact with a clinician. I would also say be persistent because, I'm 45 years old. I can probably count on more than one hand the number of like primary care doctors I've had in my life, right? And for whatever reason, maybe this one I didn't like them, or I didn't like their hours, or we change sometimes when our needs change.
Right.
But if you start and you engage in therapy or psychiatry with someone and you're like, this doesn't feel like the right fit, it's okay to say, this is not working for me. Let me try to find somebody who I think, fits what I'm looking for more precisely. Because, there are therapists who specialize in certain things. If you have a specific issue that you want to work on, try to find a therapist who works specifically in that area. If it just feels awkward, if it feels weird, if, whatever it is, you have the right to be comfortable in therapy. So, some people try and they're like, oh, that I went 2 times, I didn't like it, I never went back.
Right.
Sometimes you want to see, like, can I give it a try, give it a couple more sessions, see if it works out. If it doesn't sit well with you, that doesn't mean you drop out of therapy. That just means you try to find a new clinician. You try to find somebody who works for you. The same way you would try to find a new dentist or a new PCP or whatever.
Right.
So those are my tips,
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good. That's all we need sometimes, just a little bit. And we'll get to the next level. At the end, guys, I will be putting up her website as well, so you can definitely check her out. But right now, I just wanted to go to a quick clip, to one of these quick music video clips, just to break it up, and then we'll come back and talk about infertility. So, guys, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, and just hang on for 1 second here. I'm already looking away. I think you'll stay in close because you love it. Try to change you in any way, and when we get too close, you just push away. Don't you know I'll never hurt you, try to change or break your heart. I'll never leave you alone in the dark. I'll do you walk away, holding my heart on there for you. Hey guys, we're back. You're watching On the Town with Tanya, and I'm your host, and I am here with therapist Iyana A. Hello again. Welcome back. So here's a stat that I pulled from the CDC, and it's actually some parts of it it's strange, but okay. So they infertility. That's our next topic, guys, and I'm going to get to everybody in the chat. Okay, we'll leave time so that we can chat with you. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Especially if there's anything on infertility, please be my guest. It said 6.1 million women in the U.S. ages. Now, I don't know why they use such a young age, 15 to 44, have difficulty getting pregnant or staying pregnant. Mm-hmm. According to the CDC, that was in February 2021 when they said this. Again, I have no idea why they added 15-year-olds, but we're not going to talk about it because I'm not sure. That's a little awkward.
Yeah, that's strange.
Isn't it? I was like, that's why.
Maybe they just mean child. I don't know. I can't say.
I don't know. That's just weird. I mean, because I was like, we're in America. That nobody should be having babies at 15. The same. But it's okay. But so yeah. So in other words, that's a high amount of people. And so you're much needed, as I'll say. What are some of the factors aside from the obvious, like health, toxic products, foods, estrogen-dominant foods, endometriosis, fibroids, birth control, I guess, feminine products, whatever, that some people may have infertility?
So, I mean, certainly there are biological reasons, right, for infertility. Sometimes it's as simple as like a fallopian tube being blocked, or as simple as slow sperm or not enough sperm, and something that can really be pinpointed and perhaps, addressed in a medical way. And then you mentioned things like fibroids, which for, Black women is a huge issue. For many women, it's a huge issue, but specifically for Black women, fibroids is a very big issue. And it does oftentimes, present difficulties to either, becoming pregnant or maintaining a pregnancy. And so, sometimes doctors can certainly say it's because of the following that you're having difficulty either getting pregnant or maintaining pregnancy. Then there are things called unexplained infertility, something called unexplained infertility, where, the person's been through every single test imaginable, everything comes back normal, yet and still they either cannot get pregnant or cannot maintain a pregnancy. And I think that that's also very frustrating. And I think that that's, sometimes attributed to things like toxins in the food or the chemicals that we come in contact with. But, it remains a big question mark for many people. Like, why is this happening to me? I definitely think that in this day and age, we are dealing with so much more stress than people did 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Or I don't even know if it's more stress or if it's just that we're more aware of like the specific reasons for our stressors, right? So certainly people have had hard lives for time and eternity, but I think, we talk about it now, and you can go on the internet and you can see a movie about it and you can read a book about it. And so I think this understanding that like life is stressful and life is hard, certainly for people for whom there is a very strong mind-body connection, I think can affect many aspects of their health, fertility being one,
Right.
I also do think that people are talking about infertility now much more than they used to. So I think there probably are more women who experience infertility for a variety of like reasons. But I also think the fact that more women are willing to say, I'm having this difficulty, makes it kind of a hot topic or an issue that people are more willing to talk about and that they're more aware of. So I think it's something that comes into everyday conversation much more so today than it 20 years or 30 years ago.
Right.
So overall wellness, I think, your fertility, your mental health, those are all things that can be affected by your overall wellness. And it's not just one factor. But if things aren't all working together well, certainly people can be challenged in their desire to grow their family. So
Right. Do you think that maybe it's well, it's just now being talked about because up until a certain time, everybody was really into the Bible and this whole religion thing, and men's whole being is, "Look, that woman's gorgeous, let me impregnate her." I mean, that's not what they do, guys, but that's kind of what they're built to do, procreate, right? So
Right.
with that being said, this is my little crazy theory. With that being said, the stigma, I'm was going to ask you, the shame probably surrounding that sometimes,
Yeah.
because guys, especially if they see a gorgeous woman, like, look at you, have your beautiful features. Like, why wouldn't a guy be like, I want to have all my kids, all 20 of my kids, right? Because that's what they're thinking. I need the next generation. And
Right.
it needs to be beautiful, right? So in an innate way, I'm really going really basic on this one.
Basic. Yeah.
But that's really what guys are made for. So maybe that's where for them it came to like, what, what's this? And then for the woman, it's like, oh, we were told, right, we're supposed to have babies. That's what
Right.
we're supposed to do, and clean the house, right? So we
Yeah.
know now that that's not all we're supposed to do, and
Right.
and that's not so true now.
Well, I definitely think that the idea of, someone who's like 35 and over having a baby is something that is much more acceptable. And it's something that you find much more often than you did 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So I think that because women now have the ability to concentrate on education and careers and like travel and do all these things that, for a very long period of time were considered to be, possibilities only for men. I think you have women delaying childbirth, and the statistics are, we know that the older you are, the more difficult it can be to become pregnant because the quality of your eggs deteriorate. The number of your egg reserve goes down. So I think some of the the forward motions of society also have affected and impacted people's ability to maybe become pregnant, because women are having babies at a later age.
Yes.
Even men are becoming fathers.
Yeah.
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 So certainly,
Well, I mean, yeah, you look at there was a couple of ladies. One lady had, I want to say she did 65 or something crazy, 70,
There was
something.
a woman, I think in India, who was like
Yes.
71 or
Yeah.
72 or something.
Yes. And that to me is an example of, wait a minute, ladies, there's an issue here. If we take care of our eggs,
Right.
take care of our bodies, who said that 20 is the age to have a baby? I'm just saying it's a hard
Right.
thing to do because we've been programmed.
Of
But
course.
in the Bible, it sounded like when mothers were older.
They would
So
have babies, right?
I mean, Mary was not no young thing. Okay, I'm just saying. So with that being said,
Yeah.
I would imagine if you, I mean, Diana Ross had twins at what? What was she? 45, 50?
I don't know. I don't
Yeah, she
remember.
was older. She was
Yeah.
definitely older. Yeah, twins. So I
Okay.
think if you take care of your body, um,
Hmm.
it's a possibility. Anything's possible. How about that?
Yeah. I think, things are definitely medically possible today that were not medically possible years ago, and as, we make more discoveries, medical and biological discoveries. Obviously, things that used to be closed off to people of a certain age or people with certain conditions are now, open, and there are possibilities.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think that waiting to have a child until you're feeling established or you're feeling settled, in your life in terms of career or finances is a bad thing. But I think that sometimes there are, just natural consequences. So I didn't get married until I was 36, and my husband and I didn't start trying until I was almost 38. That was just how my life went, you
Right.
know. So I had no idea like that I would ever have any kind of issues with getting pregnant, but I had never tried. And that was just because my life just was doing its own
Wasn't time.
thing. Right.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, that makes sense. So, well, what um how would someone go about finding a therapist to deal with this? And do you work with couples, correct?
Yeah, so I work primarily with individuals and groups of women. So I
Oh,
do individual therapy for women who are dealing with infertility and dealing with pregnancy loss. Sometimes they're dealing with one or the other. Sometimes they're dealing with both. I
mhm.
do run a group on a weekly basis, and I'm about to start doing workshops and things for women. I do work with couples. I work with couples only in the context of couples who are struggling with infertility and pregnancy loss. I don't just do, regular couples counseling.
Right.
Um, at the same time, this is my niche because this has been part of my experience. I had a number of pregnancy losses and, didn't necessarily have a problem with getting pregnant, but did have a problem with retaining a pregnancy.
Right.
And so I was given a diagnosis of infertility,
Mhm.
and it was part of my experience. And although I think for the most part I got pretty good medical care throughout my experience, I did finally go on to have a child. She's
Mhm.
now 5. Um, I feel like I got very good in most instances medical
Right.
treatment, but nobody really ever said to me like, how are you? How's your heart? How's your mind?
Mm.
And so once I think that I had done some of my own healing,
Mhm.
I was like, it really makes sense for me to do this work because I know about it personally. And then I know from a professional perspective how to treat the trauma because it's trauma, and pregnancy loss and infertility is trauma that occurs in the context of your body,
Right.
right? So it's
Right.
one thing if you had a car accident and your car was totaled and they take that car away and you get a new one, and that doesn't solve everything, but you don't have this reminder of the car that you
Right.
had the
Right.
accident.
Right.
If you are not able to get pregnant or if you experience pregnancy loss, everywhere you go, there you are. It's your body that you carry everywhere with you. And it's the body, that you feel in some ways may have failed you,
Right.
that you still have to live in and inhabit.
Right.
So, um, it's a very unique pain.
Mhm.
And I think also because of the work and the training that we get as therapists, there's a whole ethical, issue about if you're a therapist, do you talk about your own experiences? Is it ethical to do that? Is it helpful to do that?
Right.
But I think that in instances of women and families who are struggling with growing their families, it is helpful for them to know that the clinician that they're working with understands them because he or she may have experienced something similar. So I think in those instances, it's okay to say, I think I have an idea of what you're going through, even if we didn't have the exact same experience, because that was my experience. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people who do what I do.
Right. You have to be trained, specially trained for this, correct?
So I'm trained in trauma.
Right. Okay.
And providing, trauma treatment. In terms of like developing this as a specialty,
Mm-hmm.
there are people who do it, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a pioneer in many ways.
I got you.
Certainly when you think about infertility and you see commercials about like, fertility clinics and stuff, the face of infertility and pregnancy loss is often a white one. And so in terms of being a Black woman who
Right.
works with primarily Black women, I work with everybody,
Right.
but certainly I think being a Black woman who's dealing with infertility and pregnancy loss and trying to find a Black therapist who knows about that,
Right. Good luck.
it's
Right.
hard. So I'm trying to get the message out there, like there are therapists like me who exist. There's also, I know of a male therapist who's actually starting to do the work with men.
Oh, wow.
It's even more rare to find
Brilliant.
a man who does this with, men who have, their partner
Right.
has experienced pregnancy loss or they've had difficulty growing their family, if they're a gay couple. But, it's hard to find this kind of treatment.
Wow.
It is.
Wow. Well, I think that's awesome. I was going to ask, what are some of the questions, if someone's experiencing infertility, what are some of the questions they can ask when they're looking for a therapist? You hit one of them, because I would definitely ask, are you trained in this, or have you done this work before?
I think it's appropriate if you are seeking assistance for any kind of trauma. I think it is okay for you to say to the prospective clinician, is this something that you have knowledge of? You can ask if it's something that they have professional knowledge of. You can also ask if it's something that they have personal knowledge of. Whether or not the therapist is going to talk to you about their own personal experiences is up to them. But I think it's certainly okay for you to ask.
Right.
I think it is also okay, to explain, to understand that like what has happened to you is a trauma, because
Yes.
miscarriage is very common. For example, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. So 25% of all pregnancies end in miscarriage. It's something that, many women have experienced. At the same time, it's traumatic. And so just because something is common or just because something happens often doesn't mean it's not deeply wounding and deeply hurtful. And it doesn't mean that you just need to like shake yourself off and just move on because like, oh, I'm one of, however many millions of women. So it's okay for you to understand that what has happened to you, if you've experienced pregnancy loss or if you're dealing with infertility or have dealt with infertility as trauma, because it is. And you have a right to talk about it and to seek a place where people are not going to be like, don't talk about it or get over it or move on. Your thoughts and your feelings are valid. So
absolutely. That's why I would think to me, it would be pretty much on the other side, very important that my therapist has experienced that. And that's just because, you're dealing with special language that they may speak, acronyms or whatever. And who wants to educate a therapist, especially really?
Right.
Well, you would know, okay, you have to do this treatment. If I say something, it's not like, oh, well, what is that? What does that look like? It's like, you should know what it looked like. But so it's I think it would be very helpful.
It's very important. I mean, I have a number of clients who are going through IVF, and there are all these acronyms and this test and that test, or AMA and like all, and you want to be talking to somebody who gets that, who knows what that is.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you have to know every single medical term, but there's this, like you said, there's some degree of understanding that you want your therapist to have when you go into a therapeutic scenario, and you don't want to have to be explaining yourself all the time. So that's helpful, and that's like one of the things that if somebody were interested in like trying to do this work, you just because it was your personal experience doesn't mean you don't need to do research and you don't need to be up on the latest information, because you need to be able to support your clients through their experiences.
Yes, and you have to know the latest drugs, the latest therapy, the modalities, whatever's going on. Yeah, no, definitely can't just assume, especially with that.
No.
But well, here's a trivia question. What would be some things, and so everybody listening, there's some things you would not say to someone doing IVF, because that's a big thing.
Yeah, it's a big thing. One,
Just stopped.
I would not say to someone who's let you know that they're going to be doing IVF or they're undergoing IVF, oh, so adoption wasn't an option for you, or there's a lot of foster kids who are looking for parents. I wouldn't say anything because
Right.
first of all, there's always this like what's always implied when people suggest adoption to someone who's unable to become pregnant or unable to birth a child, traditionally, is that adoption is so easy. It is not an easy alternative to giving birth.
And it's just as costly.
It's hard. It's complicated. It can be just as disappointing. It could be just as lengthy, just as frustrating, And so if someone says, I'm doing IVF, the best thing to say to them is, wow, I really hope it works out for you. Or, you must be a little bit nervous, but, if you feel like talking about it, I'd love to hear about your experience. I would not say to them, how much did it cost? Or how many rounds have you done? Has it been successful? Or I had a friend who, did IVF and, 10 times and she never got pregnant or she never carried a baby. It's like the old adage, like, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything. Right. And if somebody were, when my clients come to me and they're like, I'm doing IVF, I'm, overjoyed for them, because to get to that decision is often a hard one. Mm-hmm. It means that either their insurance pays for it or they found the way to do it, financially somehow out of pocket. And so it means that they're one step closer, hopefully, to getting their family to look the way that they want to. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I will also acknowledge that for most people doing IVF or considering IVF, that's not the route that they thought that they would be taking in order to grow their family, probably when they initially started, So it can be bittersweet. And it's like, oh, okay, we finally got to the place where we can do IVF or when we can afford it. It probably wasn't their first choice about how they were going to try to conceive or try to grow their family. So just try to be sensitive.
Right. Okay. So now we know a couple of things. What was that? Oh, I had another question about that. Oh boy, darn it. I just totally blacked out on myself here. Okay. What should I do? Things to not say, and it was something else, but I just totally blanked out. Oh gosh. I think that's former COVID brain. That's crazy. But what else can you tell us about if especially for men, that must be a challenge. What are the things that they have to deal with, or how can they be supportive?
Well, I think, so you have these instances where, when we think of infertility and we think of pregnancy loss, we tend to think of it as a woman's issue. Mm-hmm. We don't tend to think of it as like a couple's issue, whether that couple is a heterosexual couple or a homosexual couple or non-binary couple. We usually think about it only in the context of someone who identifies as a woman, and we don't think about the partner who's also lost a child in the instance of pregnancy loss, or a partner who also wants to grow, his or her family and has been challenged, also. I think first, when we think about men who are dealing with this, we want to be empathic. We want to be understanding. We want to acknowledge that for them, it is, it can be difficult also. And we want to let men know that it's okay to have feelings of sadness and disappointment. And it is traumatic too. So acknowledging their feelings and their experience. Also, I think we want to let men know it's okay to feel your feelings, because men are socialized to be really strong. Nothing bothers me. Men don't cry. There was like all these messages that men get growing up, and then even when they're adults, it doesn't really give them permission to be upset about something.
Right.
So, we want to acknowledge their feelings and give them permission to grieve in the way that they see fit.
Yes.
Also, we have to think about the fact that, men who have a partner who may be struggling with infertility or pregnancy loss, they may also feel like, well, maybe it's me, maybe I'm not virile enough, or maybe I'm not fertile enough, or, maybe there's a problem with my health or my body, or, there are all kinds of ways when people are experiencing these type of issues with growing in their family that they blame themselves, man or woman.
Right.
And so it's really important that, even if, let's say, the man has a low sperm count, that's been the identified issue. It's a biological reason, but it's not your fault.
Right. Right.
And so we want to also make sure that men are paying attention to their mental health care and, any feelings that they may be experiencing as a result. Also, we want to encourage men to go to the doctor, because sometimes what will happen is a couple will be trying and trying and trying. And the automatic assumption is that, oh, it's the woman, like her ovaries don't work or her fallopian tubes don't work or something.
Yep.
And sometimes it's a problem. It's a biological problem with the male partner. And so, and no man wants to hear like there's a problem with your sperm.
Right.
So often they will not even go to the doctor and participate in the process, figure out what happens.
Well, I will tell them this: it's their fault that they didn't get a boy. You can look that up. That is science, right? You swim fast enough, so that's the one thing I'm gonna give you all of that. But yeah, I'm just messing with you guys. But that is a fact you can actually look up. So couples can come to you. They can get the mental piece that they need to deal with all this stuff. But are they also going to doctors first to figure out, okay, let's try changing the whole diet first, and then we're going to try this, and then so there's steps and procedures that. Okay.
So the mental health piece is only one part of the whole, fertility process. Definitely, if you've been trying for some time, technically, you have to have been trying, I think, for, depending on your situation, 6 months or a year without having become pregnant, to, be deemed infertile or to, be given the diagnosis of infertility.
Right.
I always tell people, like, don't wait. If you feel like there's a problem, if you have questions, go to your provider, go to your GYN, go to your, PCP and say, listen, like, we've been trying, we don't feel like this is working, depending on your age and depending on your medical situation and depending on, what you've been doing to try to become pregnant, they can often refer you to a reproductive endocrinologist, who can take your blood and can measure a woman's egg reserve, can measure hormones, they can see if you're running too high on a certain hormone or too low on a certain hormone. And, if you can get that information at month 6, as opposed to month 13, it's a lot less stress on you and your mind. So yeah, definitely talk to your provider. So try to find out from a biological perspective what's going on. If you feel that your provider is dismissive, get another one.
Right.
That is like, if people can take one bit of advice from this whole conversation, if your provider doesn't listen to you, if your provider doesn't take your concerns seriously about the fertility process, get another one. Okay, just move on. But then, so in addition to the mental piece and the biological piece, many people will go to an acupuncturist because acupuncture has been found to be helpful for many people trying to increase their fertility or increase their chances of implantation, cutting out certain types of foods.
Yes, because a lot of foods are estrogen dominant, the people don't know. And so they're eating all like chickpeas. If I was going to try to get pregnant, I probably wouldn't be eating chickpeas, but that's just me.
Right.
Estrogen dominance causes other things that may be a part of the other problems.
So it's really important, right? And it's really important to say, I think much more so than me saying like, don't eat this or don't eat that, is go to a provider who specializes in this, have them do a workup on you, and then they will probably put you in contact with the nutritionist or with the dietitian who will say, for your particular medical presentation or situation, you want to stay away from this, you want to eat more of this or eat more of that. Some people have like their system is susceptible to inflammation. So they won't drink alcohol or they won't eat gluten, but everybody's situation is different. But what you want to do when you're thinking about fertility is think like holistically. So it's not just the medical thing. It's not just, like a mind over matter thing. Also, if spirituality is important to you, how do you incorporate that into your process? If you attend church or you attend temple or you meditate, or if there's something that's a part of your wellness package that you've been neglecting, take a look at that and see how you can incorporate that back into your daily routine, because what we want is stability on all cylinders.
Yes, because you want to line up your chakras and get everything
correct
get everything in line, because a lot of time for any body trauma, I call it, that if you're not aligned, then now we don't even know what the issue is.
Yeah. I have a Reiki, a Reiki professional that I work with very closely, and I actually sometimes make referrals to her because I feel like I'm taking care of the mental piece, but sometimes it's the spiritual piece and the body mind connection piece the Reiki professional can, address. So it's not like these 10 things work together. 1 + 2 is 3. You got to find your kind of balance.
Yes.
So,
yes, it's all about balance. I mean, even down to if I, get mentally unstable, that's still some kind of an unbalance.
Chemical
I'm eating wrong, and I'm out in the wrong environment, and I'm around negative people, and I'm, all those things play a part on your, I call them that's not the right word, they're ohms in your body that provide the energy or whatever it is you need to do whatever it is you need to do. If you take it from that standpoint, it's very important that you get everything aligned.
Get in alignment. And if you don't know how to do that, that's when you reach out to these professionals who can help guide you. And what works for me may not be what works for you. So everybody has to kind of find their own path, but definitely seek answers. So many medical, we have so much more information than we did years ago. There's so many tests that we can take, or, protocols that we can follow. You can get answers. And if someone's not helping you, like I said, move on, because somebody else has the answers.
That says Ariana Grande says that next. Thank you.
Yes, thank you next. Right.
Life is short, and we want to live it up and do the best we can and be the best we are that we can be. And you got that all comes back to get yourself in alignment for everything. Because if you're off, then that causes other problems and other issues. And then next thing you know, just off to the races with it,
Right.
Just,
yeah.
So I'm learning. But thank you so much. I think we're going to go to the chat box just to say hi to some people. Is that okay? And then we can wrap it up. And if you have any last words, last requests, let's say hi to everybody. First of all, everybody out there. It's Iyana and Tanya. I see Yvonne. Hey, Yvonne, how are you? And Joe, thank you for checking us out. We appreciate you. Grandma Norma, hey, how are you? Thank you. Yes. And Deborah, oh, she's amazing. She wrote a book on domestic violence, but it's not a domestic violence book. It's just something that helps people. It's very short, to the point. So, hey, Deborah, I see you out there. Great work you're doing there. And Rich, always thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see. Anybody had a question? Let's see. I thought I saw something here. Anybody had a question out there? Pandemic has affected me mentally and emotionally. Yes, everybody. I don't know anybody who's went unscathed, quite frankly. And if they said they were, they're probably lying. There's just no way that you can
just unaware.
Locked in your house for 2 years and just come out like, okay, let's just be like normal again.
Everything's great. Right.
No way. It's not going to happen. I don't care what anybody says. So let's see. So Rich talked about anxiety and things that happen. Let's see. Say, I believe that as a Black man, I have had some, what do you say here? Okay. I've had some inherited trauma. Yes, absolutely. I think we have. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
And white people have too. They pass down, trauma's passed down to them. So
generational trauma, right, is not specific to Black people. I do think that there are specific, though, ways that trauma shows up in different groups because they have collective experiences. I definitely think that Black women, in talking about like fertility and pregnancy loss, Black women are 4 times more likely to die during their pregnancy than their Black counterparts.
Yep.
So
I was almost one of them.
yeah, me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
So I know.
Unfortunately, fertility or infertility is not just about, do you have the baby? It's also about, are people listening to you? Are people hearing you? Are people taking your concerns and your pain and, seriously? And so certainly that's something that we have to deal with. And I see there's a question that says, do I think that there's a war against Black female reproduction? I don't think that there is a for most people in society a calculated conscious choice to ruin Black female reproductive possibilities. But I do think that there is a history of not seeing Black women and not believing their stories and not believing their issues are valid. And I think that that trickles down to every single aspect of Black women's lives. So I think in the sense that it may not be direct, but indirectly, yes, we are challenged when we want to become pregnant and when we get pregnant, and we are challenged when we go to have our babies, because more of us do not come home from the hospital or do not make it to the hospital, to give birth than our non-Black counterparts. So in that sense, I think that, the system doesn't work for us in many ways. And the reproductive process is just one more way that it doesn't work, that, things don't work for us often.
Right. Well, I think, Rich, I think one of the things might be touching on is, like, for instance, like a Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger, that whole theory behind that is probably what I think he might be touching on. But for me, that's what it is for me, because I know some people that worked at one of them, and it just, to me, mind boggled me that they only put them in Black neighborhoods, and they put all the Black girls everybody's on pill, but they put us really on it quick and didn't want our parents to know. And we all know that allegedly, we'll say, in my opinion, birth control pills are not the greatest thing. They're the greatest thing for preventing births, right? Fine. But in my holistic body self, I'm not sure that I'd want my kids on
birth control,
because for what it looks like for us as brown women is fibroids and cysts and and all these other things that are popping up.
Yeah, the kind of imbalance of hormones can certainly be a problem, right? And altering whatever our body's natural kind of like balance.
Yes, or chemistry, yes. And which is why that question is a very good question, Rich, because I don't know. All I'm telling you is, why would you? I know everybody in my family, especially my family like in Louisiana and some other places, they told me you can't take birth control. We're not allowed to take it. You can't take it even if we wanted to. We're literally allergic to it.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? Now, why would that be? Is my question.
Right.
I think I've watched too many episodes of Hunter. With Jordan Peele. I think I watched way too many episodes. But I do think, like, okay, so now tell me, when I hear something about Margaret Sanger or something like that, why I come up with this conclusion.
So there's there's a lot of controversy around Margaret Sanger, and like a more careful analysis of some of the literature is like questions whether or not she really was trying, to and keep Black babies from being born, regardless, of whether that is true or not.
Right.
I definitely want to acknowledge that there have been like medical institutions and mental health organizations and institutions of power, that have subscribed to racist ideas and racist practices that wound up adversely affecting, Black lives and, and the lives of Black women and Black mothers.
Right.
I definitely think that, we are not seen and we are not heard. And because of that, it is much more risky for us to become pregnant and it's much more likely for us to not be able to carry a pregnancy to term because of medical mismanagement. So in that way, I definitely feel like, as a Black women, our reproductive possibilities are limited and challenged.
Yes.
And there's all the controversy now about the abortion, the abortion ban in the Supreme Court, and how do racial politics, play into that. But it's a good question, and it's certainly something that we need to be considering. And it's certainly something that I feel like it's important to have providers that look like you, because they need to be aware of what you're up against, not only just like medically, but also societally, and in terms of racism and all the other isms.
Right. Wow. Well, I have enjoyed talking with you today, and I hope my viewers, I know my viewers got something out of this.
Yeah.
A whole earful, because between that and the trauma and the infertility, it's just a lot of stuff going on. But just a little piece about that, not Margaret Sanger, but just in general on that piece, for me, when you think about slavery and how we were used to actually procreate to make more slaves, then it's like, well, where did the disconnect come with the body? Then now I can't even, that I'm having problems.
Right.
So
I can't get the help. Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Certainly something is afoot. Right.
Exactly. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Something's array or weird.
Yeah.
And that's just me thinking back, like, okay, at one point we were like rabbits, right? And now all of a sudden, and it's particularly certain age groups, certain groups,
Right.
and it's just weird to me. So I'm not saying it's total conspiracy theory. I'm just saying I probably think it was, because that's just my thing.
I mean, and certainly the history supports that, right? Like, we know that in Puerto Rico, there were women who were sterilized, and so
right here too.
Yes, it's not like totally far fetched. So it's possible, and it's sometimes down to a person. You don't know what a person is thinking, or what their particular motivations are, or what we have these biases that sometimes we're not even aware of, that motivate us and inform our behavior and our policies and things like that. So yeah.
Well, what's one last piece of advice you can give us to alleviate all that anxiety and fear from all these things? Whether we're talking about infertility, there's that part that can still build stuff for us, or whether it's racial trauma, or whether it's work trauma. What's something to take away today?
I think the one thing to take away is, regardless of what you're going through, whatever the particular challenge may be, find someone to talk to. There's no shame in getting things off your chest. There's no shame in saying, I'm struggling with this issue and I need some help. If we have a cold, we go to the doctor. If we have a headache, we take Tylenol. It's just, we can liken, seeing a therapist or seeing a psychiatrist to just bringing in the assistance that we need in a particular issue. So whatever the issue is, find someone. And like I said before, if you start with someone and it doesn't feel like the right fit, just keep trying until you find your person is out there. Your provider is out there.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Ayana, and you're welcome to come back anytime and talk about anything. Someone just put something in the chat. Who's that? Thank you for answering the question. I learned a lot. Thank you, Rich. And thank you to all of our viewers. If you need to reach out to Ayana, you can certainly reach her on the website there, and you can always inbox me if you forget or can't find the information.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. She's on LinkedIn, Instagram. You can find her. Okay. If you check my page, I think I posted something.
I'm everywhere. Yeah.
She's everywhere.
If you want therapy, if you want coaching.
Yes.
I'm your girl.
And you can do it online, correct?
It's all virtual. So you don't.
I love it. Virtual therapy, guys. Hey, let's go. Let's go. We have to get it, because we all need healing. So I thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch. I thank you for gracing us with your presence and your beauty. You're absolutely stunning.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Love your hair. It's stunning. So thank you for that. And anytime, like I said before, you want to come through, you got a book to promote, anything, you just give me a call and it's on.
Certainly. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Yes, thank you. So just hang out for a minute, and guys, I'll see you next week. I think I have a boxer on. I got a female boxer. Ooh, so you guys stay for next week, and we'll see you guys. Somebody said something again. keep sending me. You are a blessing, Miss Ali. Yes, she is.
Yes.
No relation to Muhammad Ali, right?
No,
No. Okay. Darn. That's what
but I
I was.
did meet him when I was a child. I met him when I was a
Really? You met him?
I did. Yeah.
He was awesome. So
Mhm.
thank you. And we appreciate you so much. Guys, we will see you next week. Hang out for a minute. There you go.